G'day everyone. I was just reflecting on the last video that I did and the words of Paul, the words that came from the Spirit about the sort of state we were in before God grabbed hold of us and showed us Jesus and gave us the capacity to just trust Him. We tend not to like that kind of bad news. We don't like to think about ourselves as having been in the state that Paul described. He described the people who, a person, us, and that we used to be in a state when we were an absolute wreck. And at the time maybe we thought we weren't a wreck. Because we have this tendency in our lives to just kind of cover over things. And to not see things that are just plain yucky. You know, there are sometimes, when I was a Christian, before I was a Christian, there were times when I looked at myself and I didn't like what I saw, but I didn't stay there for very long. I would put it out of my mind. I would feel weak and position myself as a victim somehow of circumstances. I would blame other people. I would put a positive spin on things. I would draw attention to how other people acted toward me rather than how I acted toward them. I didn't even think at the time about how I was relating to God and what God might think of me and what I was thinking and doing and saying. We don't realize at the time there's a kind of a blindness that is on us, where we don't actually see ourselves how we were. It's only later on, as we do the journey of being a Christian and we draw closer to God, in terms of we get to know Him better, that we have things exposed about our lives and the way we operate, that where we start to see how deep and mucky the way we lived was, especially if we continue in a particular pattern, a pattern in keeping with the way that we used to live. And God reveals it to us, and this time, instead of seeing it from the perspective of pigs in mud, before we were Christians, we were like pigs in mud looking at each other thinking, no, we're normal, the way we're living, the way we look, the mud that covers us, it's normal, everyone's like that. And then we become Christians, and over time, when we start to just learn to look to the Lord and know Him, we discover our motives are so dodgy and so self-centered and that sort of thing. And the Lord reveals these things, not in order that we'd sit there feeling ashamed, but in order that we would do the opposite, just turn from it and actually take hold of what He has for us instead. But in our former lives, if you like, before we were Christians, we didn't like looking at ourselves and seeing ourselves for what we were actually like. We were used to accusations and judgments, and we avoided them, and we tried to bolster ourselves up, and sometimes we did it in order simply to get through, because if we were to look at ourselves, and we would just get plain depressed and hopeless and not want to get out of bed. We just weren't aware of the fact that we were just running around our own lives and just centering our whole lives just on ourselves and on our opinions and on our feelings and on our desires and seeing everything from that perspective, and hardly ever getting in someone else's shoes, and certainly never, ever wanting to know things from God's perspective. And we spent time giving into things and giving into desires and justifying it and feeling pathetic and sometimes even judging ourselves in order that we would feel like we were in a better place. I'm a better man than to do that. How could I possibly have done that? I'm better than that. And then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we just try and forget, and then we sort of learn to live with some gritty realism that just says life is difficult and people are terrible, and we focus our attention on other people and how they behave and how awful they are, and we try and bolster ourselves up by looking at how bad other people are. And that's how we used to live. And then sometimes we'd do something that looked good and noble, and we thought, that's actually what I'm like. And we just don't see our state back then. Paul is telling us and revealing this to us because we're in a position now where we can actually see ourselves a bit more like how we really were, but also so that we would really understand that how we were was no way to live, and we had nothing really to give and offer, in order that we would turn away from it completely and turn to Jesus completely. Paul says all this not so that we'll feel bad about ourselves, but in order that we'd give up on ourselves and thoroughly take hold of the hope that we have in Jesus, the provision of Christ. Take hold of his love, take hold of his power, take hold of his goodness, take hold of his capacity to do that which is right and good and true and lovely. Take hold of just his truth, take hold of his wisdom, and not look to ourselves any longer for things. So that's why Paul says it. And I think if we're honest, we hear that and we go, you're right. We know that there is a life to be found in God and a truth to be found in God, which is way beyond what we used to live, and is a resource way beyond the resource that we used to have. And that we really did miss the mark before, and we really had fallen off the way, off the path. But now Paul is saying, hey, take hold of what has been gifted to you so freely by God. And that's really good news. I'd encourage you to do that even today. Look to God. And when I say look to God, I mean look to what and who God has given you in Christ. And interact and realize that there is a massive exchange that God has made. He has come into our world in the person of his Son, taken on board himself our humanness in order that we can take on board what he has and be joined with him and share in his life and power and truth. So I want to encourage you to do that in the little ways. It's the little ways that count. Because the little ways all make up one big life. So I encourage you to just decide and repeatedly decide, Jesus, I want to look to you. I want to look to your love. I want to look to your power. I want to look to your ability to persevere in faith. I want to look to your knowledge of Father. I want to look to you in all the areas that we need to. When I'm tired, I don't want to just pump myself up and try and do it out of my own resources. When I'm tired, I rest in Jesus, and I'm learning to do that. That's what I think we need to do, and God calls us to. That reminds me of that verse in Matthew 12:28, no, it's not 12:28, it's in chapter 11, I think, where he says, come to me if you're weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. Yeah, our heart finds rest in simply relying on the grace that's in Jesus. Yeah, have a good day.